Our nation's first vice president, John Adams, remarked, "I am nothing, but I could be everything." Musical theater of the 1930s gave us the fictional Alexander Throttlebottom, a comic character as vice president. And while the vice president has often come in for derision, it appears our next second in command will have a lot of work. The office of the vice presidency is undergoing a transformation under Donald Trump, and that could be good news for Mike Pence and the rest of us. Ed Berliner has the story.
Nixon was chosen not because Eisenhower thought he was the best man, but because he was the right balance for the ticket. Eisenhower always had a certain lofty distaste for some of the tactics that Nixon used.
I assume the presidency under extraordinary circumstances never before experienced by Americans.
There's never been a White House in which the vice president was given the power from the very beginning to basically assemble the administration.
A team of foreign policy thinkers who had advised Bush during his campaign were soon embedded throughout the administration. Condoleezza Rice nicknamed them the Vulcans. Cheney was one of them, but his portfolio was much broader.
I basically was given pretty much free rein to get involved in whatever I wanted to get involved in.
Harry Truman once complained that the job of the vice president was to go to weddings and funerals. Ironically enough, he was in office only 3 months before becoming the chief executive. Vice presidents have always been those who walked in the footsteps and the shadows of veteran politicians and were rarely seen as powerful in their own right. That may be about to change.
Mike Pence, looking at how many registered lobbyists were upon that transition team created by Christie, said, you know what? This is a conspicuous problem. Donald Trump said he's come to Washington to drain the swamp, and there are lobbyists in every element of this transition team and in senior positions. So Pence said, I'm going to get rid of them. Even though on 60 Minutes, Donald Trump said, I can't get along without the lobbyists. They're the only ones we can hire. Well, Pence is challenging that proposition throughout all the lobbyists as of last night. So he has to hire lots more people and has to hire them on the fly.
Donald Trump will soon be president as a political neophyte. Does this mean we are about to see Mike Pence become the most powerful vice president in American history? JD, it's all yours.
For more on the expanded role of Mike Pence, both in the transition and in the next administration, let's call on our radio roundtable via Skype from Boston, Massachusetts, in the studio where he simulcast his eponymously named Howie Carr show that you see each weekday afternoon at 4 o'clock Eastern here on Newsmax TV. It's the one and only Howie Carr. And from New York City, the man who is heard on 77 WABC, Curtis Sliwa. Curtis, of course, the founder and CEO of the Guardian Angels. Gents, it's great to have you here. Howie, let me begin with you. Mike Pence taking over the transition. You know, it's almost as if you have a corporate structure and Donald Trump is the CEO. Will Pence be the chief operating officer?
Hey, it'd be okay with me, JD. If he's going to be Dick Cheney, that would be fantastic. I think that's the best decision Donald Trump has made in this entire campaign, even better than hiring Kellyanne Conway. Mike Pence was quite an asset to him. He's just got the perfect temperament. He's got the Washington experience, the CEO experience at the state level. That was a home run. And, you know, he's also an evangelical Christian who was raised as a Catholic. I mean, he's got everything.
He's checking all the boxes, and for purposes of full disclosure, gentlemen, like all of us, he spent a good bit of time in talk radio, which ain't a bad thing.
I forgot about that, JD.
Yeah, so he's one of us. So, Curtis, is there any downside to this other than the inevitable Bush-Cheney comparison that the left will prompt?
No, and I look at it I take it from a completely different angle. Glory Haliaski, Alleluia. Shamu, El Jefe, Christie is dead. They harpooned the whale and he's come ashore on the Jersey Shore. Remember, he was the go-to guy. He was the head of the transition team. And I'm telling you, he was on his way to becoming Attorney General. John Mitchell, to Richard Nixon. Thank God they put him on the shelf, or we would have been facing double trouble. So Pence or anyone else is 10 times better than Shamu, El Jefe, Christie.
So I guess,
JD,
Howie, it's obvious.
JD, can you imagine if...
Go ahead.
Can you imagine if he had picked Chris Christie as his running mate? and that Bridgegate trial had gone ahead. I know it was in federal court, so we wouldn't have had any video, but every afternoon, Bridget Ann Kelly, the former aide to Christie, is coming out crying and weeping, single mother of 4. Christie threw a water bottle at me. Christie's framing me. Oh, my goodness. I think that would have been worse than the Billy Bush Access Hollywood thing.
All right. So
but Howie, the benefit is that Chris Christie, as we saw during the campaign, knew how to stand online in Mickey D's and get those quarter pounders with cheese, the strawberry shakes, and the fries for the Trump family. He was very good at that, except he ate half of it on the way back.
Okay, now look, we're going to call a timeout because we're looking back
of the trial, JD. I got to interrupt you, JD. One of the great, Curtis knows this. One of the great moments in that trial was apparently there was something sent out over Twitter or something, a picture of Chris Christie with a box of donuts. Remember this, Chris? Curtis? And he went nuts. He was trying to track down who had sent this out, that he would be connected to donuts. I mean, that's what he's all about, his total ego. That's it. I agree, Curtis. We dodged the bullet.
Howie.
All right, guys, look, I got to move the conversation along. I know the Chris Christie one-liners are fast and furious, but that was then, this is now, we got to look to the future. So you got Pence running the transition. Despite the press trashing the transition, it looks like things are moving along. And this morning, the news of a very curious olive branch from Chuck Schumer saying, there's some infrastructure projects and there's some things we can work with the president on. Curtis, let me go to you first. You know Chuckles Schumer. Is he an honest guy coming in to work with Trump on these issues?
He's a schmuck. Don't make that a putz. It's Chuck E. Cheese Schumer. It's always about Chuck. And it's about protecting the hedge fund monsters that he's been whining, dining, and pocket lining on Wall Street for years for himself and the DNC. And, that's the one sector on Wall Street that Trump said he would go after, the hedge fund monsters. So he's trying to protect his interests and make nice. But beware of Chuck Schumer. The Ides of March will be upon you, Donald Trump, if you trust Chuck E. Cheese Schumer.
All right, so you warned us about Chris Christie a couple of weeks ago. Now you're saying beware Chuck Schumer. Howie, let me go to another story that's out there. There is talk about Mr. Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, having an actual role at the White House. You'll recall, since you're up in Boston, there was JFK who hired RFK as his attorney general. Is it that big a deal to bring in the son-in-law if the guy's an effective executive and can be helpful?
No, he's a good businessman. The way I see this, JD, yesterday the theme of the mainstream media is Trump is an anti-Semite because he hired Steve Bannon. Now, today, it comes out that he wants to hire Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, who is an Orthodox Jew. So we forget totally Steve Bannon, and now the storyline is Donald Trump is engaging in nepotism. And you're right. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, I don't think us hiring RFK by JFK, that was not a good decision. It shouldn't have been done then. But in this case, he's not going to be the attorney general. He's a very talented guy, and he has Trump's ear. And I think it's a great move.
Curtis, before we get your input, we're going to hear from Kellyanne Conway, who appeared this morning on ABC's Good Morning America, talking about this very subject.
He's not applied for that, and he lives here. He runs a pretty significant business here. Their 3 small children are here with them. And so it's a very important decision that many of us face, frankly. But he has not applied for anything formally, and I just think many of these press reports are false and inaccurate. And I would just call on everybody to just give us a little bit of time to form our federal government, get those appointments in place.
Jen's only about 1:30 left. Curtis, Kellyanne's basically saying the New York Times and the other corporate media outlets are throwing up these false flags. Is there anything believable coming out of the reporting there by Trump Tower amidst this transition?
Yes, that they are trying to prevent and stop my very dear kumbaya chief, Rudy Giuliani, from becoming Secretary of State. Look at Rand Paul with his family, Root Paul, Ron Paul, all the Pauls. They're saying, oh, no, I'm going to vote against it. Yeah, that's accurate because they hate, they despise, and they loathe the best mayor. In fact, America's mayor, the world's mayor, Rudy Giuliani, who would put fire and brimstone into the State Department if he was the next Secretary of State.
What about that, Howie? Mayor Giuliani was kind of flippant at that conference about the job as Secretary of State. Is this passing him by, or will he get it? We're hearing today Nikki Haley is stopping by, and her name has been linked to that job. Is that just a non-starter?
Now again, JD, I mean, you know, the storyline has to change, because before it was, you know, Donald Trump holds a grudge and he hates people. Now he's reached out to Ted Cruz, who, you know, they were like scorpions in a bottle. Now Nikki Haley, who really went after him during the South Carolina primary. You know, I think she's pretty good. You know what? I would like to see Rudy Giuliani as the new Attorney General, though. I'd like to see Rudy Giuliani go in there. He knows the Justice Department. That's a terrible snake pit. Clean that up. And, you know, put Ted Cruz on the Supreme Court. He's only 45 years old, and he's a member of the club. And I trust him. I don't think he'd turn into David Souter. That's I don't know.
We're gonna turn into pumpkins because we're out of time. Howie, Carr in Boston, Curtis, Sliwa in New York. Gentlemen, we thank you for your insights and analysis about this transition, and there's more ahead as we continue.